we don't have Claude or Anne.
You do have a quorum, but you don't
We
have
just-
Ann.
Ned, Bruce, Paul. No, we don't have Anne. Well, over to you folks. Do you want to get started or not?
You can wait a few more minutes. I'm in no hurry. I don't.
Okay, minute or two. The pressure is on, Paul. It's your turn for a story.
I think I'll stick with the reformatory line because now it's stuck in my head from looking at this picture.
Yeah.
One of the photos I put up, or I used as a background during one of the meetings was the hotel
Yes.
that was down there, and that was actually considered another station, train station. That hotel was constructed the late 1800s for people that came out to visit people at the prison.
Oh,
That made sense. There was no way to get to the prison other than the train. So there was only, two ways you could really get to the prison, and it was either in the West Concord Center, and then you could walk, or they had the reformatory line, which ran right up to almost the existing rotary, and that's where the hotel was, and you could stay there. Neat old stuff.
old stuff is good.
And the land between, this has never really been talked about that much, that there's from about where the state police barracks is, going all the way across the street and right down to the Concord Depot now. And all of that land was in 1859 was called the, it was a meeting of all of the militias from the area prior to the Civil War.
Yeah, it was a giant mustering place.
Yes, muster. Thank you. That was the word I was searching for. And there were over 500,000 people visited Concord during those 3 days to see that muster. There are maps of it. There are drawings of it.
Yep.
I've looked, no known photographs of it, but that's a huge chunk of West Concord history that a lot of people don't know about. So that's my story. I'll keep going if you want.
I like it. we're an old town.
Yes.
And we think the trains are old, but we go back so much further than that.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating stuff. And I spent the bulk of my time in Concord over in the western suburbs, and we are quite famous out there as well as in Concord Center. It's lots of fun. And then if you think about all of the farming, another whole part of the story that we don't often lead with when we're talking about ourselves, but we are a busy place. Lots of good stuff.
Going back to the when the original McCones came over from Italy, and I'm told we're the first Italian landowners in Concord in the late 1800s. You had to get permission. If an immigrant wanted to buy property in Concord, you needed permission from the Catholic Church.
All right.
So they they went to the West Concord Church in the beginning, and as the story goes, my great grandfather was incredibly good at making wine,
Yeah.
And he used to bring lots of wine to the church. And lo and behold, all of a sudden they had permission to buy the land up on Strawberry Hill Road. So, um,
Humble beginnings, and there today we are.
yes, it's amazing what a bottle of wine will get you, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. And
But
that's
you know,
when
in the early days, yes, there's, immigrants need permission, but in the early days, you needed permission from the town to settle here. You couldn't just move. You had to be officially sort of a cross between begging and inviting to stay. And you could claim that you lived in Concord, but unless you had settled there, you
Right.
were not legit. I just think this kind of thing is fascinating. But
it is. It
lots
is.
well, guys, what do you think? 4:10. Shall we start?
Sure.
Which will
Sure.
cause the next two guys to come instantly? Just
Sounds
because
good to
we
me.
did. Okay, so at 4:10, I will call this meeting of the Personnel Study Task Force to order and ask for a roll call vote, please. Bruce, yes, I. Paul,
Paul,
aye.
aye.
I'm missing one person. No, that's me. Sorry, me.
Excuse me,
Yes,
I'm,
ma'am,
I'm
Kari.
sorry to interrupt. There seems to be some confusion as to the agenda and the correct Zoom link. And so we have some people in a different Zoom link than where we are. And I have no idea how that has happened because everyone seems to have clicked on the same Zoom link.
It's just,
But I just checked with Chris Carmody and I clicked in the upper left-hand corner and saw the meeting information. And he said that is not the information that is in the agenda.
as
So,
I understanding that Chris Carmody forwarded the Zoom link to Aaron, who put it on our agenda and sent it out. So the agenda
Right.
came from one source through
Hi.
Chris.
This is Ned Perry, Ann.
someone may be telling Ned the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, bye-bye.
So Kari, is there any way that they can back out of where they are and join us?
I'm going to see. I don't know how some of us got to this and some got to a different Zoom link because I think we all clicked on the same thing. So I will send them. Okay, I will do that.
So
I'll figure
can
it
you
out.
do that in the
I'll do
background?
that now.
Continue?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we, by a roll call vote, we have called ourselves to order. The first matter of business is the,
Ruth, can I have a public citizen's comment?
absolutely, Ned.
Sorry. I spoke with Ann and she was waiting with others on the other link. She is being brought over to this link as we speak. So she is trying to get in with you if you want to give her another moment or two. And
I don't mind.
Mark, here comes Aaron. So I suspect.
Hello, everybody. We have more people joining us in just a moment. We have no idea what's happening, but
If I may,
Mark Howell has the floor.
I just did a quick check. The meeting ID information on this meeting where we are right now doesn't actually match the link text in the agenda. So probably if you copied the agenda link text, you ended up in one place, but if you clicked on the agenda, you ended up here. So that's my 2 cents on why. In other words, what you actually see when you look at the agenda with your eyes isn't what actually leads you here, but what's buried underneath that magic link is what leads you here.
So
It's
Claude
kind
is
of
not
like
here.
that movie, The Matrix, Mark.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
and use Chris Carmody to give us his.
Hi, everyone.
And Anne is in transit.
Claude's here. Yay,
She's on
Claude.
her- We were on the other meeting. I apologize.
We're,
Okay, so Ruth, the Personal Study Task Force agenda was properly posted. It's got a link and a meeting ID and a passcode. The meeting ID and the passcode are what unique. It differentiates each meeting, and the hyperlink is the way to access it. But really, the meeting ID and the passcode are what determines the Zoom location for each meeting ID. So for this particular meeting, it's not this Zoom link. So basically we've all entered into the wrong conference room, and the right conference room is right around the corner with a different meeting ID and passcode. And I can give that out now. But this meeting does not fulfill the public posting requirement.
well, where's my town clerk? I thought she said it did. Never mind. So it doesn't matter if you give it to us, Chris. If you're saying use that next time, we're looking at use something now.
Right,
Are
so
we
the meeting,
going?
Oh, Carolyn is in the meeting alone. She just sent me another email.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is a problem. This is a
Right.
problem because we have a meeting happening in two potential locations, because
Which
one is what you see
doesn't-
and the other is what you click on. So I don't think,
I just clicked
Gonna
on
work.
the agenda that came out and here I am.
Yeah.
right,
The point
the-
is that the meeting ID and password on that agenda, if you entered that information, you would end up in a different place than if you clicked on the link. So that agenda really has a way of leading you to two different places. And short of figuring out some way to merge those, there's kind of no way to prevent somebody from ending up in one place or the other.
yeah, so
Oh,
Mark, we'll
but-
have to take a look at that because that Zoom link, you can see the meeting ID for the 885 meeting is actually embedded into the Zoom link itself. So there is something funky going on with that Zoom link.
Yeah. What I did, Chris, was I went into participants and did copy invite information and pasted it someplace else, and I end up with a completely different Zoom link than the
Yep.
Zoom link that's there.
Yep.
And I see that the meeting ID of this meeting is 810-2357-3601, which is clearly not what's on the agenda.
That's right. That 810 number is the wrong meeting
Right.
ID. Yep.
So,
So why don't we
So,
all go back to the town website, click on that Zoom link and reappear.
the
uh,
problem
could-
is that some people are copying and pasting the Zoom link. And when they do that, they don't get here.
right.
Oh, Carolyn Reed is here. She got here.
Kari, what if we
Okay,
reposted right now?
I'll tell you what I'd be willing to do if this would solve it, is I will get on that other meeting with a different computer and watch it. And if anybody shows up, I'll redirect them here if you guys want to proceed on this meeting. Would people be willing to accept that as a solution that way?
Yeah, that's like putting a sign on the door.
Sounds like a good
Yeah.
idea.
Okay,
Yeah,
Thank you for the offer.
Thank
sure.
you.
I'll tell you as soon as I've connected to that.
Won't it be great when we can meet in person?
that would be excellent, excellent. All
So-
right.
So should we go ahead and,
Well, we have called ourselves to order.
No, I think you should
With-
wait. I'm sorry.
Yes, we are. We are.
Okay.
We have, I'm letting Ann know that we've not gotten anywhere. We
okay,
have essentially called ourselves to order. The
Okay.
end.
and then did you do the roll call?
Yes,
Okay, and then
but we
can we add myself and to Claude to that?
all done. We're,
Right.
I'm keeping a list, just
Great. All right, so the first thing on the
Right,
agenda,
no, as I understand, and we have to wait for Mark to say he's on.
So I'm connected to the other meeting and I'm the only other person there and I've got that sitting on the side. So I'll keep an eye out for you.
Okay,
thank you so
thank you.
much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Carry on, Ann.
All right, so the first order of business is the approval of the minutes. Do I hear any?
Wait, one small edit. I have to renumber, slight numbering issue, but nothing material.
Where?
Oh,
What?
there's item 4 and then item 4 again.
Oh,
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
just housekeeping.
Yep.
yeah.
Okay,
So the second 4 is 5.
And then from there on and so
And then
on.
from there, yeah. Okay. So with that correction, is there any other additions or corrections? Yes, Bruce.
Bruce.
Under the public comments, I don't see anything in the detail it should be. Ned Perry talked about a bunch of different things. My recollection is that the select board charge of 85 is still in existence, should be followed, and the bylaws from 2017 should be followed. I don't see, well, I think we ought to have a little more detail in there.
Do you have a suggestion about what to add?
He pointed out the personnel charge of 1985 is still in effect and should be followed.
It says right now that he pointed out the personnel charge of 1985 is still in effect
And I would add should be followed.
and should be followed. Okay.
And then there was something said about the 2017 bylaw, and that's in effect and should be followed. I don't know if I got it quite right, but Ned's on here. He can straighten me out. Those details should be in here, I think.
Going for a walk.
Mhm.
Happy to add that.
Okay.
Any other changes or additions? Hearing none, can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I move the minutes are accepted as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. So then we move to correspondence, and there was a very nice letter that each of us got from Ned Perry, and I just wanted to make some comments that I have in response. And just wanted to say that I really appreciated the appreciation. And I also felt a renewed enthusiasm and about a vision for our collaboration into the future as well as now. And his point about employees being asked for their opinion, feeling good about it with the survey was wonderful as well. Are there other comments that other people want to make? So thank you, Ned. It was fun. It was fun reading the old town reports.
I saw Ned's hand up. I think he wanted a comment. Yes.
No, I was just thanking Anne for her comments. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody should have gotten by now the survey data, and we're not going to be discussing it in individual detail because obviously you haven't had time to read it. First of all, I want to thank Erin. I don't know, is she still here? Did she leave?
No,
There
sorry.
Oh, you are here.
People that weren't members put their video off, and I was
Have
trying
you?
to follow the right etiquette, but I'm here.
I just want to say on behalf of the task force, thank you so much for helping us navigate all the technical stuff, especially. with getting the survey out to everybody and so forth.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I want to, I don't know if you've noticed, but we had over 50% participation by the employees, the town employees, which I think is just incredible. Usually with surveys, having done a couple in my professional life, I considered anything over 20% a wowza. So this was quite unusual. And I have a couple of comments I'd just like to make in general about how to read the survey, the responses. The aggregate responses in the graph part will have different numbers of respondents. If you take a look down on the left-hand side of each page, you'll notice that there's a number. And although there were, what, Aaron, 181 responses?
Yeah.
101 respondents.
On some of them, there are like 170 only that respond. So note that when you're reading through the graphs. The number of employees who are longtime members of the workforce here in Concord is just amazing to me. I think it was like 40%, something like that. And it really says something about institutional memory in my mind. And then the other thing that you could get caught up in, and I want to make sure you understand this, is that the number one response in the narrative sections does not correlate to the number one responder in the next narrative section. So in other words, there's no comparing who responded first in one with who responded first in another section. They're not the same person. And the other reminder is each comment, particularly on number 33, the last one, represents one person. It's not a whole group of people, it's one person. So look for themes amongst the responses in the narrative. And does anybody want to say anything more? Aaron, do you want to say anything more in terms of, and use this information as data for the recommendations you would make about your assignment?
Thank you all very much for your commitment to the task force. I could say that on behalf of my own self as an employee, and I do hope that you find the information valuable to inform your recommendation to the board on how we can do things better. I know that there are things that I can do better, and I think that if we use it as a way to grow, it will be very valuable and very useful. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Ruth, do you want to say anything?
I was very pleased that we had such a robust response that employees trusted us to state their views, and they knew that we won't know who they are, but they wanted to let us know what they were experiencing. So I can't go up to anybody and shake their hands and say thank you. So I just want to say thank you, everybody.
Anybody else?
I just want to second the thank you to Erin. She's not only has been the survey been in play, I had some a couple of questions to move along to get some answers to, and although I don't have the answers, I appreciate the work that she has done in facilitating trying to get them. I do have some, but not all yet, but that's has nothing to do with Erin. Just thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Great. And then the next thing that on the agenda was the format for the final report that we do to the select board. I had started because we had a little bit more time between our last meeting and this one, to think about what ought to be in it, other than the specific recommendations for the different bylaws. And so I was looking at the agenda this morning and I realized, oh my goodness, that did not get sent as a separate initial piece of paper. So I sent that out this afternoon, or late this morning, I guess, to all of you. I don't know if you've all gotten it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And so do you have any comments about what I have for headings in terms of things that are missing? I have already done some writing, and that will be put off until next week, next meeting for your review and input. I will say a couple of things. One is there has been a theme about communication, and it clearly comes out in the survey as well. And there's also a theme, I think, from all of our research around what I quoted the Society for Human Resource Management, as well as the Collins Center and other reports that we've looked at, that talk about the role of personnel has changed and the needs of personnel and employees has changed. And we have to reflect that in our recommendations, I think, in terms of some of the tactics versus some of the more, what I refer to as strategies. So more coming. Anybody have any thoughts about the table of contents?
Not really, and I apologize for not having more input to you, Ann. This is the compensation and classification sections 5 and 6 is very complicated. Quite frankly, I'm still lost. I'm not. I've watched a few meetings. I don't really have anything to report because I don't understand it yet. So.
Well, that's fine. I mean, we're in the draft stage at this point.
Right. I don't want you to think, I don't want to get a demerit for not having my homework in on
No,
time.
don't worry about it.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Well, we all are. We're all working on it.
And working hard, and I know that, so.
Yeah. So if we start off with the discussion, I'd like to call on Bruce first.
I'm still struggling with trying to figure out what to do here, so I don't really have anything to say yet. I will at the next meeting.
Okay. And as we go along in our discussion, as people are making their suggestions, please remember that they are suggestions, and that after each person has had a chance to make their suggestions, then we could ask questions and give some additional input. So Bruce, you haven't worked on, you haven't got anything about the 1985?
Oh, I've gone through it numerous times. I'm still trying to figure out what my thoughts are. I finally got an org chart last week, so we'll plug along, see what we can do. I have nothing at the moment.
Okay.
No demerits, please.
No demerits. Glad you're here. Ruth, should we go to the personnel policies that you've been involved with?
I saw a gap of 3 personnel bylaw number 3 and number 4. I didn't see that anybody was assigned that. So I grabbed that and then I went on to PPPs.
Okay.
So
why don't we start with bylaws 3 and 4 then?
Okay. So talks about personnel policies and procedures, which is the rest of my task. And that it generally identifies the personnel board, the town manager, and some town meeting, but generally personnel board and town manager as the responsible parties. It's reasonably up to date. It was updated in 2016.
Right.
Section 4 has to do with employment status. And that tells us that all employees must be assigned a designation, whether it's admin or lineman or media, whatever it is, you have to fit into a designation. And I received some of those up to date separately, but it needs to be fully fleshed out, because benefits are based on the designation that you belong in. Okay. And for recommendations, I'll say right now, all of my recommendations for personnel policies and procedures are generally find the missing ones and update, or review the ones that we have and update. Because there are going to be things like state and federal law that's changed that needs to be reflected properly, or the different names and divisions. And that's not our job. Our job is only to point out the current state of affairs and what needs attention. I could step through all of them, but it's a working document. And I think what's important here is, as I say, what the recommendation to the select board would be, and that is find them, review them, update them.
Hi, folks. I think that's great, Ruth. We actually, in an earlier meeting, and this goes back quite a while, so everyone's forgiven for, this not being at the front of our minds. We talked about a potential addition to Section 3. I'm happy to mention what that is now, if that's helpful.
Yes.
One of the, looking at Section 3, it ends with employees are provided an opportunity to review and comment on any proposed policy that could have a significant impact on the conditions of their employment. And what was suggested is the addition of the following 2 paragraphs. So it stays, the suggestion is it stays the way it is with the following addition. In addition to notification of the potential policy, employees shall also be given notification of the personnel board meeting in which these changes are on the agenda. All significant personnel policy changes are subject to the review of the personnel board. And then the second paragraph, if an employee feels that a significant change is being made, but is not being classified as such, the employee may contact the chair of the personnel board, who will arrange for the topic to be discussed at an upcoming meeting. So this just makes crystal clear that employees absolutely need notification, that they not only, and what that notification means, the notification of the time it's on the agenda of the personnel board, of course, their ability to go to the personnel board to hear it. And if it happens not to be considered by the town to be significant, the employee can disagree respectfully and say, I think it's significant, please put it on the agenda. And I think that, kind of answers some of the issues that we're hearing, so.
I concur, Claude. I do remember that suggestion. And I do think it needs to fall under our recommendation. I don't know that we would be responsible for adding that language. Maybe we would, but that I think is the strong point of what we're doing, is finding where we need the fixes. And when it comes to that, I wonder whether we should indicate a preferred way of notification. Whether, we say personal notification or notification by department or division, or how it's going to work. I don't know that that's our responsibility, but we certainly should indicate that there is a notification.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think that sounds good. As
As
as long as we get that communication part squared out, I think that's good, Claude. That was well put.
Now, the only other thing that I would like to bring to your attention as sort of in the throes of this document, I hope to have it more fleshed out, but way under number 42, which is, at the end.
Is this a policy or bylaw?
Policy.
Okay.
I discovered that employee assistance program, which is a very valuable thing in an employee's world, EAP, is listed once under PPP 42 under drug and alcohol testing. And that's a very valuable place for it to be. But there are so many other reasons that someone might want to or need to make use of an EAP that I suggest that we find a way to put that someplace else, more general.
Would it stay under policies? Or are you suggesting that it be moved it be collapsed with another policy?
I don't know that I'm the best one to decide. I'm just saying it is within something that's very narrowly focused, drug and alcohol testing.
Okay.
And EAP is broader than that. I
Right.
thought maybe it could be moved, but I don't know. Claude's been in this business. He might be able to say, does
So,
Pete,
yeah, no, those are all really good points. I mean, what I'd say is the bylaw, which is really the crux of our charge to make suggestions to the select board about how to change the bylaw. The bylaw says that the personnel board and town manager shall adopt and maintain personnel policies and procedures. The personnel policies and procedures themselves are obviously separate. Now, I'm going to suggest that we be careful if we want to additionally, in addition to looking at the bylaw, make suggestions about personnel policies and procedures themselves. I think that's okay, but that's really, according to the bylaw, the purview of the personnel board and the town manager, and not so much our task force. It doesn't mean we can't do it if we think it's important, but I think we need to kind of do that separately. The other thing is, the suggestion about how we think about this and making these changes is that anything in the bylaw is something that becomes semi-permanent and can only be changed by town meeting. So it must be something that we consider to be very, very important. And my sort of take, and others that are more expert in human resources and personnel could disagree, but my take is that personnel policies have tended to become more generous over time, especially in the recent past, because it's become harder to hire and retain employees. So if we put more things into the bylaw, that also means that it takes an active town meeting to change that. And I wonder if we should be a little cautious and make sure that the town manager and the personnel board have the flexibility to make changes in response to needs. For example, if there's a change in practices, 80% of town employees can see that reflected immediately, but not those who are covered by the bylaw because they have to wait for town meeting. And if the change comes up in January, you might have to wait a year and 3 months until the next town meeting. So, and I'll give an example. Paul brought up, which I thought was a really good idea. It doesn't seem that the requirement of a human resource manual, a policy manual, there's a phrase for it.
Employees manual.
Employee handbook, right. An employee handbook isn't required and it doesn't show up anywhere. Well, if we think it's important enough, we could certainly put that in the bylaw and make the suggestion to the select board that it go into the bylaw. That would seem to be something that would be very sensible for us to consider. Individual smaller things like how many holidays or the way certain things are treated, those are probably best left to the personnel board and the human resource and town manager, to make those under normal policy. So just as a kind of general guidance.
Claude, I want to piggyback on the back of what you're talking about. The
Yep.
other thing that I think we ought to consider, I certainly did when I looked at the bylaws, is some bylaws might need to move over to being policy and vice versa.
Mhm.
And because one of the things that we know, the nature of employment these days needs to be more flexible. And by keeping it a policy and not a bylaw, that gives us a little bit more of leeway. So I have been considering that when making some of my
Yeah.
recommendations.
And I concur, some things, need to be nimble. And I felt that I was looking at PPPs, which are already policies, and I haven't, oh boy, my language, sorry, I haven't dabbled in the bylaws. I've only been really paying attention to the PPPs. So if the EAP question had been in the bylaw rather than in the PPP, then maybe I would not be saying, because I would realize we couldn't access it. And of course, in the meantime, we know that Amy, the HR director, is providing some new language under EAPs. I'm just suggesting that not that we keep it or toss it, but that we move it where it can be more accessible.
Other comments from other task force members?
Just a general one, possibly. On winding back to Ned's documents and letter that he provided to us, was actually kind of nostalgic because I this entire time from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, that's while I was working for the town. There was it was started, I know personnel or HR will groan or some other employees will groan, but what was it, I thought was a great, and this is a little off topic, I realize this is just, I'm throwing something out there. It reminded me that there used to be a newsletter that came out to employees
It was
called
wonderful.
called the Employee Connection.
Yep.
And I'll be perfectly honest with you. Everybody, though some people were, they thought it was kind of a joke. It was really nice. It was really a great way. It was actually, this is pre-computers, folks. This was a paper document that got delivered to each department. I think Laura Landry did most of the work, and I know she hated doing it. I guess it was a pain in the neck.
It was Doug Marr.
Okay, it was Doug Marr. All right, I'm sure
He worked.
I see Doug on the screen here. He's probably throwing darts at me right now. But maybe with it really, as far as communication is concerned, it was a great way. It was kind of poo-poo on the employee if you didn't read the Employee Connection, because the town hall would throw things in it. It was a great way. I think that people felt connected. I 100% support the employee handbook, but I would love to see some resurrection of the Employee Connection.
Yeah.
I tried to find a copy of it. I know I have one. I can't find it. Ruth can talk about it. She remembers it.
Well, I do remember. I know that Doug worked really hard to bring all of the information, whether it was who had the new baby or which recipe or which local town event. If the light plant had an open day, there were photos of kids riding in the buckets, or if CPW was celebrating their week or their month and they had the 8th grade out, there was all kinds of stuff so that people knew what other departments were doing. Right. And they also could recognize fellow employees for what was happening in their lives. And it was very low tech, but well done. It was a good product.
Mm-hmm. I know that's off the beaten path, folks, but I had to throw it in there somewhere, so.
Yeah.
It made me think back to that, and that may actually solve some communication problems.
I actually don't think it's off topic. I think, what I agree with what you're saying. What we're trying to craft is getting back to that same feeling that you felt, and whatever way it is, whether it's through bylaw, policies, handbook or something like that. I think, we all agree that that's exactly where we want to go, to that same sort of feeling.
Great.
I'm seeing nodding of heads, so.
Yeah, it was good.
I think we should have Aaron do it starting tomorrow. No, just kidding. I'm only kidding, Aaron.
Oh, the piece that I liked about Ned's letter, if we're off topic, was, did you notice in the years that he was highlighting from the town report, the personnel board was meeting twice a month, and they were meeting in collaboration with others to address employee needs. I thought that was fascinating.
Mm.
And there was a member of this, there was a member of the finance committee on the board, right?
On the board, yes.
As there are in a lot of other towns. I think we've kicked that around a little bit before.
So Ruth, do you have any more you want to say about?
As long as you continue to believe that it's a work in progress, I'm not finished.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Oh, I see Anita is here.
And I just wanted to clarify that the finance committee person was just the liaison observer from the FinCom, not a member of the personnel board,
And not a voting member, right?
not a voting member, correct?
No, but it was still important that they had a representative there. So that the silos need to have some intersection at some point.
And just a comment about the employee connection, Aaron, you might check with the town clerk's office. When I was town clerk, I actually kept a file for all those employee connections. So you'll have at least a few years worth. I think they stopped maybe when Doug retired, but in any event, there's a big box of them somewhere in the town clerk's office, if you wanted to see what they used to be like.
Great. Okay. Claude, do you want to talk about section 7?
Sure. Let me just bring it up.
Aaron, did you have your hand up?
I noticed that Susan has her hand up.
Who?
Susan Bates.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I just wanted to point out that, I'm sorry, that when I was on personnel board, the employee connection was enforced, and it was electronically, it was on, you could, as a board member, we were given the password to the employee to access that specific thing, not to access the other things in the employee part of the website, but that was ongoing, and that was, I was there on 09 to 17, so.
And did you have to access it on the website, or was it sent to you? Did you have a choice?
Well, I never asked to have it sent to me, but I was given the route to access it on the website and it was a monthly occurrence. And I'm trying to think, my years are blending together here. It was 2010 to 2019 that I was on the board, and at least part of that time it existed, just to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. So Claude, are you ready to do the salary schedules?
Yeah, so 7 and 8 are somewhat technical. And what I'd say is these are probably best grouped along with some others that are somewhat similar, that we should probably get reaction from the town manager and the HR director to see if there are any issues, if they find any issues with these. You know, for example, in training status, you know, it says, okay, you're in training for the first 6 months of service. You may be released from position at any time, you know, and it goes through the process of how long the in training period is. It's hard in isolation, I think, for any of us to take a look at a provision like this and say whether it's good or bad or workable or unworkable or should be changed. So I think it would be helpful if these are impacted at all by anything that we have in the survey. Great, that's one data point. Another data point would be the town manager and HR director to see, you know, if they think any of these, you know, it might be sensible to adjust them to give more flexibility to the town in hiring or retention. You know, is 6 months the right time period? Should it be shorter, longer, and so on? So I don't know that we as a committee have the full expertise to make that kind of determination. So with some advice, you know, we can look at it. So I would set these aside for now, and perhaps my guess is others might have similar provisions of the bylaw where they would say also, okay, let's hear from the HR director and town managers what they think of these. The other section that I was assigned to was to go further and to talk about what the employee ombuds concept might be like. Should I talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just read it because then it's pretty self-explanatory. The suggestion is for a new section of the bylaw, section perhaps 21, employee ombuds. Concord's employees are one of its most valuable resources. In order to make sure every employee concern is heard confidentially, productively, with compassion, the town manager should designate the human resources director or an alternative town employee to act as employee ombuds. While the ombuds is part of an informal process and cannot make any decision on behalf of the town, the ombuds can provide employee with information and guidance and can confidentially communicate concerns. The ombuds should attend personnel board meetings. Oh, actually, do you know what? This is an older version from when I first brought it up. Let me restart. I sent it, if you would, I tell you what, rather than look through my email, I'll just say what the changes to that were. Effectively, in terms of who it can be, I broadened it to say any town employee or any town committee member, to give the select board as much latitude as possible for who to select. So basically, any town employee, any town committee member. And again, this is just a suggestion to the select board. And then with confidentiality, there are some issues that actually can't be heard confidentially. So, you know, I changed the wording to say confidentially when possible, because if it's a certain type of issue, you actually have to perhaps take steps, you know, which is a legal, somewhat complex legal issue. And then the next paragraph, yes, it's an informal process, cannot make any decisions, but the idea is to hear the employee's concern and confidentially communicate those concerns for the personnel board, or depending on what the issue is, perhaps to other resources within the town. Of course, if it's an issue regarding harassment or something else, it might be going in a different direction. The idea is that the ombuds should attend personnel board meetings, not to turn personnel board meetings into grievance sessions, because open meeting law and employee confidentiality mean that personnel board meetings are really probably not the right venue for that. But the idea is, let's say there's a working condition in a certain area of town employees. They want to say, look, you know, we're not comfortable bringing it up, but we'd like you to bring it up with the personnel board. That becomes a wonderful thing to bring up in a, you know, in that case, in a confidential way. And it's really meant, and, you know, highlighting what others have said before, it's really meant to bridge communications in the best way possible between the town, the personnel board, and the employees. And, you know, again, the idea is to think of this as something to suggest to the select board, with the caveat that, you know, it probably is worth talking to town council or, other experts to make sure that this sort of idea is workable. It may sound like a interesting idea to better communication, but to make sure that an employee ombuds makes sense at the personnel board.
Well, the other thing that comes up when you suggest this is, can the personnel board go into an executive session the way, say, for example, the school committee does when they have a personnel issue?
Yeah, so I looked into that. It's actually really limited. The possibilities for going into executive session, I think it's listed by state statute. There are 6 or 7 different ones. And it just because you want it to be confidential is not a reason. It has to be, and I know that I put it in my, hang on a moment. I have it in my file. If you just give me a second. Okay, I can't put my, oh, here we go, executive session index guide. So the short answer to your question is no. The executive session reasons, the first one is to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, mental health, rather than professional confidence of an individual. The individual to be discussed should be notified in writing, so that is, obviously very much a legal process. The next is to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations, to conduct collective bargaining, contract negotiation. So again, that's a broad and not an individual one. The next one is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. The next to discuss the deployment of security devices. The next to discuss criminal misconduct and so on. So just because we might want it to be confidential doesn't mean it meets the statute to actually go into executive session.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
Claude, well, I'm sorry, somehow I missed who are the possibilities of people that would be these ombudsmen or an ombudsman?
Sure. The most recent draft that I have is to suggest to pick from town employees or town committee members. So, again, it's the idea is somebody that can represent town employees. And that's, and also, I think one of the challenges of a position like this is one has to be very careful what one brings up in an open meeting. So it has to be someone who's obviously very sensitive to what state law is. If you're talking and you mention a person or somebody who's identifiable, that person has to be notified in advance. And there, it obviously is a legal minefield to get into a personal issue. If it involves something that is specifically legislated, like sexual harassment, that's a completely different process. So it has to be somebody who effectively is trained in how to react to, a whole slew of potential situations. And what a number of towns might do is, if they have such a role, it might be unofficially done by somebody in the HR area and so on. Doesn't obviously necessarily have to be. Aaron, perhaps there are, I believe, 2 sexual harassment officers in the town. So that's kind of analogous. And there's obviously lots of training that goes into that. So a person has a choice of 2 people. So perhaps the ombuds could be a choice of 2 people as well. So, it isn't something where we should think of the town deciding lightly of who this person is, because what we don't want to do is turn the personnel board into a legal minefield that is an open meeting.
Yeah, I mean, as a follow-up to my question there, if I may, this troubles me more than the present system as far as legal liabilities. Expecting another employee or a committee member who's really not acting in the capacity of their committee to have to sift through things. I think we're running the same or a worse legal minefield, Claude, than we might presently have if that the personnel board could address a grievance. If you throw another person into it who has to, before you decide that you can't hear what you're hearing, you have to hear it.
Yeah. No,
Um,
that's
I think
definitely,
there's-
yep.
I think it's fraught. I think it's fraught with a few problems.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the communication issue and that type of thing, but I think this is a minefield.
You know, it's absolutely, you're 100% right. It is potentially a huge problem. The way that, I didn't want to draft it in a very limited way, because there could be situations, so one way to do this, to not have that sort of concern, is to do it the way it's currently done unofficially. Currently, the head of HR comes to personnel board meetings and would communicate those things, because currently, in effect, the head of HR is the employee ombuds. So if everyone feels that works well, that's great. However, it could make sense to perhaps have somebody else that works in HR. So again, that person is trained, might have certain certifications, knows how to react to avoid the legal issues, but to have a second person other than the head of HR in order to do this. The reason I didn't want to write it in a limited way to only allow somebody from HR is, what if you happen to have somebody in town that used to work in human resources and no longer does, and would be eminently qualified because they spent 20 years in human resources, a number of years in another position. I see somebody smiling, and if that person were nominated as employee ombuds, maybe that would be a good person. So I think you're 100% right that it is potentially a minefield, but it's, and again, it obviously needs enough votes for the group to pass, and whichever way it is, it could be something that if somebody from the town manager's office or someone from HR was doing it, or the perfect person who happened to be on a committee that we could also appoint, and again, the provision is for the select board to approve. That this isn't something that's elected in any way. It has to be approved by the select board. And if the select board thinks, okay, it makes sense to do it, this is the right person, we think it's mitigating the risks, maybe it's worth doing.
My
But
only,
no,
my only other commenter would be if we got to that point, I think our system has failed. If we have these layers of HR, EAP, and the present possibility of being able to go before the personnel with something, it seems like we have multiple layers here now that, if they're working properly, are probably okay.
Okay, so what that would mean,
I just throw that out there, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, no, it's the way it currently is. The head of HR is the de facto employee ombuds. If everyone thinks that works great, then there's no need to change it. So,
Any other thoughts from the committee? I'm looking at the clock and it's 10, almost 10 after. And I know we started late. I would like to go to new business and open it up to the public. Is there any new business task force members? I think this has been a good discussion that we've had. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to take it further next time. So are there any comments from any of the listeners that are on the call? Yes, Ned.
I thank you for the comments from the task force on my memorandum, and appreciate your reviewing the 90 and 91 board reports. I found your comments about the FinCom representative being attending meetings being very important, because this year particularly, there doesn't seem to be any review of the personnel package. We know the personnel board didn't really look at the entire package. At least I didn't see them doing that. The FinCom didn't hear any of the personnel board articles, so they didn't look at it. And the select board had it on their agenda, but there were no questions about the package. And I asked a question about benefits, which was partially answered, but no one was really looking at the total financial side of our equation. So I'm hoping that in your recommendations to the select board, that there will either be part of a charge for the personnel board to review the entire package, or the select board will have a heart-to-heart discussion with the finance committee, and there will be more interplay between the personnel board and the finance committee than there has been recently. Again, thank you for all you're doing. This is a great discussion, and I understand that a number of personnel policies have resurfaced in the townhouse, so that if anybody's looking for any of those, I believe that your staff assistant, Erin Mulcahy, will be able to provide them to you. So terrific work. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Anita.
Just a couple of things. This was a great meeting. Thank you. In terms of observing, it was great. First comment about the ombuds person. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I spent some time the past couple of weeks and read through all 40, word for word, all 46 sets of minutes that are available online for the personnel board going back to 2011. And not once, so it's possible that concerns or complaints that were brought to HR were resolved at the HR level, but not one time in those 11 years was an issue brought, a concern of an employee brought to the personnel board. So it's just an observation. The second comment, having spent this time, I do have some observations myself of what I see as an evolution of between 2011 and 2021, where the last minutes are available online. And I will be putting that, I've developed a chart, but I will be putting some narrative with that and sharing it with the task force before your next meeting. I'll try to wrap that up in the next few days.
Thank
So
you.
that's a heads up.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. I think that'll help a great deal. Thanks.
Mark.
Just getting you on mute.
Yeah.
Thanks, and I agree quite a bit with what Claude was pointing out, which is that I do believe that only very important things and things that we consider fairly unmutable should go into the bylaw. But I believe I'm correct as well in suggesting that the charge from the select board to the personnel board is also within your scope to make recommendations on. And so what I would suggest is that if it's important, especially if it pertains to activities, reviews, reports, things of that nature, that the personnel board, in your opinions, should be involved with. Those are really good things to put into the charge, so that the charge reflects the sort of the delegated authorities and the responses that are expected. The charges can obviously be changed through a process, a dialogue between the personnel board and the select board at any time. And there's often real opportunity for citizen involvement and comment on those charges as they're done. So I think that I would encourage you to consider what the charge says, and things like, reports on the competitiveness of recruiting versus other towns and those sorts of things. I was impressed, and I really appreciate that Ned dug out those 1990 and 1991. That had demographic information in it that wasn't readily available when the DEI committee went to do its work in 2021. And there it was 30 years ago. I think that's the value of ongoing longitudinal reporting, is that we can see where we've been. And certainly outreach to employees and the extent to which that they've been engaged in the process, including the list and the names of employees. I don't know about you, but I was impressed to find out that by 1991, Dick Krug had already accrued 20 years with the town. That was impressive to me personally, but thank you so much. And it's been a great discussion.
Thank you, Mark.
I just want to say, if I can, I think that's an excellent suggestion, excellent way to think about it. That certain things go into the bylaw, and then, the bylaw obviously has to go into the charge, but then we could certainly, as Mark suggested, layer on other things. I think it's a nice way to think about it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Any other comments?
Just for completion, nobody else connected to the other Zoom meeting the whole time you've been meeting. So
thank you very much for doing that, Mark.
You're welcome.
Ruth, have you got any final thoughts, comments?
Oh, they continue to come, and Mark just raised one that I had at the beginning of the meeting, and that's how are we going to keep this from happening again? Because, I saw it in real time. It went from Chris to Aaron to the agenda to the world, and yet somehow underneath it all, things got in disarray.
Oh, you're talking about the link.
The two different links, yes. So we're going to have, it's one more thing that poor Aaron has to take responsibility for.
That is at the top of my list.
We'll have a conversation later on. I do want to draw your attention to the next meetings. Excuse me. The next one's April 11th. And who will be ready to report out?
I'll do more. I'll have more.
Bruce and Ruth? Okay.
I'll have more. I'll have an introduction to my thoughts.
Great.
In this stack of paper that I've now somehow put aside, April 11, is that hybrid or Zoom?
That's virtual.
Okay, Zoom.
Our last virtual meeting.
Okay.
And we'll get the Zoom link out and straightened out between now and next week.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no other further comments.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thank you. Wait, how do I get out of here? Okay. Leave.